Good morning, everyone. Right, so I have got a month left until my stage 2 ACL revision, which is the term for a second ACL replacement. I had my first ACL replacement back in 2003. I ruptured that replacement in 2004. I had it removed, but then never replaced again. And I learned to deal without it. And I did fairly well without it, but we'll get into that detail later. The purpose of this video, and indeed the series on my channel that you are now looking at, is to document the ACL revision at 40 years old, to track the prehab, the surgery itself, the recovery, and then the rehab afterwards. And the reason I'm doing that is partially for my own curiosity, but partially also because I am someone who's quite analytically minded. I like to get into stuff and understand what I'm in for. I like to know exactly the procedure. I like to know how it works, how it should work, what to look for, what to do, so on and so forth. I like to go into things as well informed as I can. And so I've been sat doing a bunch of research. I've read a number of papers. I have done a whole lot of searching. I have watched a ton of videos on YouTube, many by surgeons, many by physios, many by patients who undergo the procedure themselves. And the thing that I've noticed, particularly with regard to the people undergoing the procedures themselves, is everyone seems to be quite young. Everyone seems to be in their teens, maybe their early 20s, and yeah, it's just, as you can expect with this kind of injury, it usually happens as a result of some sort of competitive sport, something that involves twisting and pivoting on the leg. And so it's understandable that you would see many people in sort of high school age, college, university age. That's where I did well in the first time. But there's very few, in fact I've come across none, people who are in their 40s, late 30s even, who are active, who understand that you need to look after your health properly, who are taking appropriate measurements to align their lifestyle such that they're looking after their health span, trying to increase that across their lifespan. And so I want to do a series for them, because I can't be the only one, right? I can't be the only person of my age group who's looking at this kind of procedure, thinks that it's beneficial. And I'll rewind there for a second. So the reason that I'm going for the ACL replacement now at 40 is because as I've aged, and particularly across my mid-30s into my late 30s, I have had more and more instances of instability. In other words, the bottom half of the knee slips forward over the top half, and that's the job of the ACL. It holds it in place, whereas the MCL stops it going the other way, or the PCL. But more and more instances of instability, which hurts, right, when it happens. And every now and then that happens, and you pick up a secondary, sort of a collateral injury to go with it, and then it takes ages for the knee to feel good again. And for someone in my 40s, I'm aware that movement is an integral part of looking after my metabolic health. It's an integral part of making sure that my health span is as high as possible across the rest of my lifespan. And there's something about getting into your late 30s and into your 40s where that starts to really matter to you, that the sort of penny drops, and you start to understand just how important looking after that health span is, because it's the difference between getting to 60 and 70 independent and still living a high quality of life, versus being dependent on others and having practically no quality of life. And it starts like in your 30s at least. Obviously the earlier you start the better, but if you want to hit those sort of golden years and still be functional, still be independent, looking after yourself, that work has to have started in earnest in your 30s or at least your 40s. Because if you wait any longer than that, you're setting yourself up for a bit of a hiding. You're setting yourself up for a bit of a failure. So there's something about this age group where people of my age start to understand that this is actually very important, and it's something that you have to invest into. You have to put the effort in. But I could have left it alone and just dealt with it, and eventually I would have needed a full knee replacement because the damage would have accumulated and it would have just got to the point where the knee was non-functional and really impeding my quality of life. And for many, that full knee replacement is a perfectly viable option. Major surgery in and of itself. The technology has come a long way, but for people like me, I enjoy high-level sport. I enjoy competitive sport. So I train hard, and I want to surf well, and I want to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I want to compete at that again later in life. And so for me to achieve those desires, those outcomes, I need to have a knee that functions correctly, and a full knee replacement is probably not going to do that. Certainly not to the level that I'm hoping to be able to do. I may have still been able to do a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although I'm not too sure about that. And certainly surfing, could have stood up and just cruised on a wave, but I wouldn't have got much done. Right, I wouldn't have achieved much. It would have been quite difficult, and I wouldn't have done too well. So what I'm hoping to do, what I'm hoping to achieve, is by having the ACL replaced now at 40 years old, I'm hoping to make a full enough recovery and get the function and strength and mobility back in this knee to the same level, at least, that it is now, but with less instability. Obviously, having the ligament back there, I will then have stability and prevent, hopefully, any future and further injuries, and as a result of that, the two bits slipping like that. And that should allow me to surf and do jiu-jitsu and train and do all the things that I love doing well into later life. Obviously, the older I get, the less performance-orientated stuff like that is likely to be, because that's just part of aging. But that should only really start to be a factor when I'm sort of like, I don't know, 60, 65, 70. Certainly now at 40 and into my 50s, I think if I'm looking after my health and my health span correctly, I can expect to perform quite well. Maybe not as well as 20-year-olds and all the young bucks, but certainly I can expect to be competitive. I can expect to be performing relevant to my age group. So that's really the plan. So I'm doing this surgery now at 40 years old. I'm going to document the prehab, the recovery and the rehab process. One video a week is the aim, and it's going to cover everything from a metabolic health perspective, because that's my jam. That's my obsession. I'm obsessed with metabolic health. I'm a metabolic health author. I've started a biotech company which is implementing coaching, AI-powered coaching for metabolic health. And yeah, you can find a link to all of that good stuff in the video description below. But the purpose of this video series is to document this process from the perspective of a 40-year-old who is trying to look after their health span as best possible, stay competitive, stay active, enjoy maximum physical, how would you say it? You would say peak physical condition as far into life as possible. And of course, movement is a very important part of that. I need to get this knee going, and I'm going to talk about it not just from a rehab physical recovery perspective, because there's so much more that goes into it. There's the entire metabolic health outlook, And your metabolic health underpins your physical and your mental health, literally at the level of the cell. So it's hugely important. You can't understate that. So I'm going to document what I'm doing diet-wise, what I'm doing training-wise, what I'm doing for rest and recovery, the different protocols, the adjuncts that I'm using, the theory behind why I'm doing it, what works, what doesn't work, how I'm having to tweak things, and really get into explaining how this all comes together in a holistic fashion, because it's not just physiotherapy that's going to get me through this. Everything in my lifestyle, literally everything in my lifestyle, from what I'm eating, my circadian alignment, my rest and recovery, my other activity, because it's just the knee that's getting surgery. The rest of me is going to be perfectly normal and functional. All of this stuff comes together to determine the outcomes of this knee. It's not just, am I doing the exercise that the physio has given me? I have to put this whole jigsaw puzzle together, and that will show what the outcomes are. So I hope that if you're someone who is maybe in your 30s, I appreciate 40 is maybe a little bit of an oddball. Someone who's 40 years old, maybe I am a bit of a unicorn. Maybe there's not many people having ACL replacements at this age. I'd like to think that's not the case. I'd like to think I'm not unique in that regard. I'd like to think that there's many people who, like me, have maybe had that injury in earlier life, learned to live with it while they were still young and strong, done fairly well from that respect, but have now got to the point where they realize, you know what, it's now time to replace it. It's time to get that fixed, because it's starting to impact the quality of life. And yeah, so that's what we're doing, and that's what this mini series is all about. So this has just been a bit of a preamble, or a pre-ramble, you could say, but it's just to set the scene. So the idea is there will be a video a week, and we'll start this week with just a summary of what the functionality of the knee is like now. It's in pretty good shape. It's functioning well. I'm training well with it. So we'll have a look at what that training looks like. We'll have a look at the dietary approach that I'm using for my prehab. We will have a look at all the things that I'm doing to get myself ready. And then, yeah, one video a week as we lead up into the surgery. The surgery date is the 16th of January, 2026. And then from there, document the recovery process and the rehab. And it's going to be a long one. It's going to be 18 months is the estimated time. And the reason for that is I'm using an allograft, which means donor tissue. I'm not letting them harvest another piece myself, and I'll get into that into another video, because I've fallen for that trap once. They're not robbing Peter to pay Paul again. That's not happening. And so it takes a long time for that donor tissue to vascularize, grow its own blood supply, and then incorporate correctly. And the difference, the reason people are so against allografts per se, particularly in younger people, is younger people tend to expect a return to full sort of activity quicker. But you do need that lengthy period of time for the allograft to vascularize and incorporate. And if you don't give it that time, then the rupture rates are high, very high in comparison to autografts. Autografts incorporate quicker. So that's the reason. We'll get into that in a bit, but I hope that you find this useful. If you're someone in your 30s, in your 40s, or even beyond, and you're looking at, you have the choice of ligament replacement now or full knee replacement later. If you're wanting to maintain high-level functionality, physical performance, and maybe even competitive sport, maybe this is useful. Maybe the stuff that we unpack along this series will be helpful to you. It's going to look at the entirety of it. It's going to look at every aspect. It's going to look at your diet, your sleep, your movement, your light exposure, grounding, all the adjuncts that you can put alongside to help your body be metabolically well. And if you're metabolically well, you're empowering your body to do the recovery and the healing that it needs to do. So hope you find this useful. Come along for the ride. We'll see you there.